Hey everyone, welcome to today's Explainer. As a PhD researcher deeply invested in sustainable supply chains, I literally could not wait to tear into the paper we're looking at today. It is actively sending shockwaves through our field. Look, we all know global carbon regulations are tightening by the minute. Corporate inventory management can't just track financial costs anymore. It has to heavily and accurately account for carbon costs. But here's the million-dollar question. Do our current mathematical models actually capture real-world complexity? Or are we calculating our massive inventory needs using outdated assumptions? Well, today's analysis is going to completely flip your traditional understanding of inventory calculation on its head. So we are deconstructing a truly breakthrough 2026 paper by Mi-Yi Chiang and Ping-Shen Chen, coming out of Chung-Yuan Christian University. The paper is formally titled Green EOQ with Cold Chain Switching and Batch Jumping under Piecewise Carbon Pricing. Now, I want to emphasize right up front, this isn't just some collection of cold math or, purely theoretical academic exercise. It's essentially a literal survival guide for modern enterprises, especially the tech and semiconductor giants who manage these massive cold chain logistics networks. It shows exactly how to optimize procurement decisions when facing really severe, unforgiving carbon taxes. To make sure we extract every bit of value from this research, we've got a solid roadmap today. We'll hit the paper's background and core objectives, check out the limits of traditional EOQ models, and break down their three-stage methodology. Then, we'll dive into the big breakthrough, batch jumping, look at localized sourcing data, and wrap up with the overarching academic contributions. All right, Section 1, paper background and core objectives, let's just dive right in. If you look at early sustainable supply chain research, scholars kind of took the easy route. They just slap a fixed, flat carbon tax onto existing operational costs and, well, call it a day. But in an era where we face super complex regulations, like the EU's Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, or CBAM, that flat tax assumption is just way too simplistic. This research is so compelling because it precisely targets those massive blind spots in the existing literature. The authors saw these gaps and set 4 really ambitious goals. First, developing a piecewise carbon cost function. This is absolutely crucial because real-world carbon taxes don't just scale smoothly, they jump up in aggressive tiers. Second, they uniquely integrated cold chain and ambient systems into one cohesive framework. Third, they turned geographic transportation distance into an adjustable internalized variable. And finally, they bundled the whole shebang into a progressive 3-stage EOQ architecture. These objectives hit the absolute most painful optimization challenges supply chain managers face today. Moving to Section 2, limits of traditional EOQ models. Before we geek out over the new math, we gotta ask, why do we need a new framework anyway? What's fundamentally broken with how we currently calculate orders? Well, the answer lies in this massive gap between legacy academic models and modern industrial reality. Traditional EOQ models assume perfectly linear cost structures. And even worse, they completely ignore the massive electricity demands of refrigeration, which falls right under Scope 2 greenhouse gas emissions. But out in the real world, logistics networks are defined by nonlinear, highly punitive taxes, and a stark difference in energy density between cold chains and standard ambient storage. Relying on old linear paradigms from modern energy-heavy systems is pretty much a guaranteed recipe for devastating carbon bills. Okay, Section 3, the 3-stage methodology. To actually capture that real-world complexity, the researchers showcase some absolutely beautiful mathematical derivation here. Instead of throwing out an unsolvable massive equation on day one that tries to do everything at once, they built this elegant progressive framework. Let's walk through how they layered this complexity. Stage 1 is your baseline EOQ. It strips away all environmental costs to give us a pure control scenario. Then, Stage 2 introduces energy costs, strictly differentiating the power drain between cold chain and ambient materials. Finally, in Stage 3, the model hits peak complexity. It brings in variable transportation distances and those tiered piecewise carbon prices. This additive, step-by-step design is brilliant because it lets us isolate exactly how each environmental variable distorts the final procurement decision. A particularly clever trick they introduced in Stage 2 is this binary switching factor, labeled as K. When K equals 0, the model processes standard ambient materials without breaking a sweat. But when you flip K to 1 for cold chain materials, boom, the system automatically triggers a whole cascade of extra variables, like specialized refrigerated transport fees and sky-high warehousing electricity costs. It's like flipping a switch between a regular delivery truck and a massive rolling refrigerator. This lets a single mathematical model dynamically process two entirely different supply chains in real time. Section 4. Breakthrough discovery, batch jumping. Now, once this incredibly robust model was built, the team ran the simulations. And what they found is a totally unprecedented mathematical behavior that challenges literally decades of inventory theory. This is for sure the climax of the paper. To grasp this, imagine you're dealing with a policy as strict as the EU's CBAM. If your carbon emissions cross a specific threshold, the tax doesn't just bump up a few percent, it skyrockets overnight, from, say, $50 a ton to $200 or even $500. So how exactly do those punitive, segmented taxes disrupt your optimal inventory size? Look at the dramatic shift when we run the cold chain data through the three stages. In stage 1, the baseline ideal order is roughly 7,071 units. Cool. Moving to stage 2, high refrigeration costs force managers to adopt a smaller, more frequent strategy to cut holding times, shrinking the batch down to 6,324. But in stage 3, when those severe tiered carbon taxes kick in, the optimal batch size massively and suddenly jumps to 10,000 units. Why? Because at 6,324 units, you're transporting goods more often. That frequent transport pushes your total emissions near 8 tons, which triggers a devastating high-tier tax bracket. So the math basically forces you to take a massive leap to 10,000 units just to drastically slash your transport trips and drop into a lower tax bracket, even if it means eating higher refrigeration costs. The authors officially coined this wild phenomenon batch jumping. It's a discontinuous mathematical shift. It proves definitively that under nonlinear regulations, corporate ordering behavior isn't some smooth, predictable curve. Actually, scratch that. It's more like a cliff. When you face steep tax brackets, procurement decisions trigger sudden extreme jumps. You could go to sleep thinking an order of 6,000 is perfect and wake up needing to order 10,000 just to dodge a catastrophic tax penalty. This isn't just an academic aha moment, guys. It is an urgent, actionable warning for managers everywhere. On to Section 5, localized sourcing and data evidence. If long-distance transport triggers this crazy batch jumping and massive financial penalties, how do companies actually protect themselves? This brings us to the highly practical side of the paper. By opening geographical distance, labeled D in the equations, as a core decision variable, the model proves one absolutely vital strategy. The ultimate antidote to high cold chain emissions is drastically shortening the physical supply chain. The simulations show that if the distance D is small enough, the massive drop in transportation emissions perfectly offsets the heavy electricity drain of refrigerated warehousing. Mathematically speaking, localized sourcing is your ultimate carbon defense mechanism. And the authors don't just leave this hanging as pure theory, they explicitly link it to real-world industry movements. This research mathematically validates the localized procurement strategies being driven right now by tech giants like TSMC. This framework provides a rigorous quantitative decision-making tool for any company chasing those ambitious 2035 carbon neutrality goals. It essentially proves that localization isn't just a PR buzzword, it is a mathematically optimized survival strategy in a carbon-taxed world. Finally, Section 6, academic contributions and future outlook. Having explored the depths of this model, let's summarize the immense value this paper brings to both academia and the industry. Here's the core of their contribution. First, the research uses precise equations to pinpoint the elusive golden intersection between saving warehousing energy and reducing transport emissions. Second, it quantitatively proves that cold chain materials are high-risk targets practically guaranteed to trigger chaotic batch jumping under strict policies like the EU CBM. And third, it lays a rock-solid mathematical foundation for future decision matrices, basically paving the way for real-time, dynamic, data-driven supply chain tools. In their future outlook, the authors point to an absolutely fascinating frontier: energy resilience. Think about this. When renewable energy fully transforms the power grid, say a whole manufacturing hub shifts entirely to solar or wind power, dropping Scope 2 electricity emissions to zero instantly, how will your batch sizes jump next? What happens to the math when holding costs suddenly carry zero carbon penalty? This paper solves today's crisis while opening a massive, exciting frontier for tomorrow. Thanks for tuning into this explainer and keep optimizing.